Good evening, everybody. My name is Dale Hudson, and I teach here in the Film and Media program and in the MFA in Arts and Media. And I'm really delighted to be able to introduce Ursula Biemann to all of you. She is an artist whose work I've followed for about 2 decades now. And every time I see one of her works, I learn something more. So it's really exciting to have her here. And after the screenings, we're actually going to be on stage and do some questions and answers and learn more about this work that isn't necessarily apparent when you just see the film. So for those of you who don't know her, Ursula Biemann is an artist, theorist, and a video essayist and writer whose work has been exhibited in solo and group exhibitions around the world, including her 2-channel video installation, Forest Law, which was shown at the Sharjah Art Biennale here in 2017. If you get a chance to go to Venice, you can see 2 works by her. Deep Weather is on view at the Everybody Talks About the Weather exhibition at the Fondazione Prado, and also at the Venice Architecture Biennale, video work from Divina Universidad, and we'll talk a little bit about that later, is on view. Beyond these prestigious venues where she's shown her work, what I think is more important with any artist is how they engage with the work they do and who they work with and what results from it. And a lot of Ursula's work, it comes from long-term collaborations, and these are with people from different disciplines as well as people from different cultures. Her early work focused for the large part on making legible how gender intersects with globalization, particularly through different technologies. And in a video essay that I teach in a lot of my classes called Europlex, for example, she looks at how Moroccan women navigate and actually become, quote, time travelers because they move from Morocco into one of the Spanish enclaves, which is on a different time zone, to perform different sorts of work that's allowed given the politics and economics of the European Union and its relationship with North Africa. Within this, what I found really interesting is despite these structural inequalities, she finds ways that these women navigate through globalization's power and carve out spaces of resistance. She's also done other work on this, looking at other locations such as the Mexican-American borderlands, Southeast Asia, as well as Southwest Asia near the Caspian Sea. In each of these, she organizes complexities, offering a feminist critique of globalization's invisible structures and technologies. Her more recent work shifts from its scope from the global threat of globalization to the planetary threat of the climate crisis, shifting from what humans do on the surface of the planet to what ecologies make life possible on the planet. Much of this work engages with indigenous communities, drawing upon cosmologies that extend beyond Western rationalism. So rather than invisible power of globalization, she's looking towards the unseen world of spirits and non-human agency. Ways of knowing merge with ways of feeling and being together, marking a radical departure from the dominant practices of extracting knowledge through rational science, which culminated basically in the climate crisis that we have. The work that teaches us to think, feel, and understand through multisensory experiences, where categories of human and non-human, of living and non-living, of natural and artificial cannot be disentangled. Modern critical distance is no longer possible as a form of human control over nature, or human control over the non-human world, which is evident in the different ways that the films that we're going to screen tonight. So 2 films. The first one we're going to look at is Acoustic Ocean, which is set in northern Norway, and it focuses on a Sami woman, indigenous person, Sami woman, who moves between indigenous and scientific forms of knowledge in a science-fictional quest for understanding human, marine, mechanic, organic, climatic, and digital elements of life. The second film that we're going to watch is Forest Mine, and this one's set in southern Colombia, and emerges from an invitation to collaborate with indigenous Inga people at a much larger project, which we'll talk about afterwards. Among other topics, the film considers how ancestral knowledge and non-human intelligence were belittled by colonial and modern science, and only now can DNA technologies kind of catch up what has already been known for centuries with these people. The work is richly complex, and we're really lucky to have her here for the Q&A. After the Q&A is finished, there's also going to be a reception outside, so if you have some private questions you want to ask her, you'll have an opportunity to do so. And before we start, I just want to acknowledge a huge thank you to Nahed Ahmed for making this possible. Ursula, I've wanted to bring you here since we opened in 2010, and this is the first time I got to do it, so I'm really thankful to Nahed for making that possible, as well as everybody out at the NYU Abu Dhabi Institute. Right, thank you. right, everybody. Let's please give a round of applause for Ursula Biemann for her films. And everybody, you will have the opportunity to ask questions. So if you have questions, there are people moving around with microphones, and also we've got two at this thing in the what do you call, aisles. But I'm going to start off by asking a couple of questions. These films have a lot of information. And I've seen them before, so it was interesting to watch them again. And I was thinking of questions I was going to ask you, and then there were so many questions. I forgot the questions, the original questions. But I thought one of the things that maybe would be a good way to open them up to people is discuss how you went about making them and start there, and then we'll get into actually the ideas in the films. So I don't know if we should start with Forest Mind, because we just watched it, and people fresh, or go back to Acoustic Ocean. Forest Mind? Everybody's quiet. Okay, so Forest Mind was part of a much larger project, and we talked a little bit about this, and this was just the film that you kind of took away from it, and there was lots of other parts of work. So I was wondering if you can tell us a little bit more, and I was calling it devenir, reading it in French, and so it's...
Yeah, first, I should start by thanking you for bringing me here. Thank you very much, Dale, and I'm thrilled to be here and discuss my work with you. It's a rare opportunity. And you saw Forest Mind is a commissioned piece, actually, by a curator from the National University in Colombia, the art museum there. And she had the idea of sending me down to the rainforest and visit a region that has been closed off by the armed conflict for 30 years. And I didn't know what to expect, but they organized everything beautifully, and an indigenous leader, Hernando Chindoy, who you see actually in the film, accompanied me for over a month, driving me through the territory and meeting a lot of people from his community, but other from other communities. And at the end of the trip, he asked me if I could also help him with something, and it was the creation of an indigenous university in his territory. Because he felt that their knowledge has not been acknowledged by the Colombian government also, and education system, and that he wanted to renegotiate certain things, the terms also on, that have been defined by a colonial relationship. And he felt that it's only on the level of a university that he could actually renegotiate these terms. And so I was thrilled to be invited to collaborate on it. And so for the last almost 5 years, I have been involved with the Inga through many, many meetings in the field and through exchange of students between Switzerland and Colombian and the Inga students, really. To develop a relationship that becomes more sustainable and that can support their ideas of teaching ancestral knowledge, but also combine it somehow with Western knowledge and Western science, and where it is compatible, of course, ecological forms of science. And that was the frame within which I started producing also a bunch of audiovisual projects. We went together in the field to do interviews with the elders, with social leaders, with daitas. And that was the wish of these two Inga women that you see in the film, who are the daughters of the shamans. And so we came back with a lot of interviews and materials, and from this I produced my own research, which is Forest Mind, but also numerous other videos that which are really meant for the university and to teach the younger generation of the Inga people about their own territorial history, their memory, because that history has never been told to anyone. and the state doesn't really acknowledge that these territories are occupied and used by the Inga people for 160 years, for several hundred years, in fact. And so creating this memory and making it more tangible is an important way of also claiming the land, you know.
I think that's interesting because it's, we're just seeing one part of it here. And what the whole film is about is how we can only access one part. So I love the way that you do this in this film with the voiceover and also with the text, and you've done this with all the films that you've made that I've seen, is kind of translating it into a language that maybe we'll understand. And one of the things that I know is part of the whole Becoming Earth project, of which these two films are two parts, is coming up with a new language. And you described it as a language, a video language, art language. I'm wondering if you could just speak a little bit about how that changed, because the very first part of this project was over 10 years ago. So over this decade, what are some of the breakthroughs that you've had of getting out of your own mindset, coming from a Western institution, learning this rational type of science and DNA, and then being challenged with things that it takes the work of imagination to even accept that they exist. And that leap of faith to be like, okay, I'm not going to be able to access this because it's not mine. But I know that it's there, and I want to communicate this. So how do you come up with the strategies that you use?
Oh la la. Well, Becoming Earth, first of all, is actually a project that I did also with the same curator during COVID times when I couldn't go anywhere. So we decided to make a kind of a monograph of my work, of all the works who dealt with climate change, with the ecological crisis, with biodiversity, with all these kind of indigenous topics. And I realized I had to realize how these works connect with each other, and several of them, even since Forest Law that you saw at the Sharjah Biennial and Acoustic Ocean and so on, they work with the idea of an indigenous scientist, because I feel this is really a symbolic figure, a very charismatic figure that can break some of the assumptions we make with this rational science, which is we fix everything with technology, etc. And at the same time, it also upgrades our opinion we have of the indigenous people and start thinking of their knowledge as expertise, which is what Vaira is claiming in the film. Is she is asking for epistemic justice to, and I think science has really wiped out all these alternative ways of thinking about nature in much more harmonious is the word that the indigenous in the Amazon use a lot, but it's in a more wholesome way. We have not listened to the oceans. We thought it was a silent space, but in fact it's totally vocal, it's totally alive, it's communicative, and we only find out now because we happen to have the instruments by now to understand these things better. And the same is true for the way indigenous people sense in a variety of dimensions, whereas we have really focused on the rational mind and our very limited sensorial apparatus that we have, whereas indigenous really open their minds to so many other ways of being. Of course, also through the help of ayahuasca, which is a psychoactive agent. And of course, this whole discussion about the intelligence of nature, the intelligence of plants, has been discussed so much in recent years. And science admits that there are so many more intelligent forms of communicating and interacting through chemical, we have all read about this by now. But science does not go as far as allowing or admitting that nature has intention. I think that's where science stops. Indigenous people have no problem with this idea. So in that sense, there is really a distinction.
And it's fascinating. I mean, I'm always love things that teach me that I don't know anything. Like I think that's the most exciting thing to encounter with any sort of artwork. And I love the way that you actually put the films together. So you're resisting the kind of observational, like we're just going to observe and understand, which is the total mode in documentary, and you bring in all these kind of playful moments that kind of challenge us. And it seems kind of playful, but actually it's super, super like dense with information. I think that's a fantastic part of it. And I thought I would ask one more question about Acoustic Ocean and then open it up. And I can't see people that well because of the lights here, so if we maybe bring up the lights in the middle a little bit. But with Acoustic Ocean, I mentioned this to you earlier today, the first time I watched it, I completely thought that, is anybody from Sweden or Norway who's here? No, okay.
Someone there.
Oh, wait, somebody, okay. Do you recognize the actor? Okay. So people from Sweden, Norway, and maybe Finland as well, I don't know where the shows are shown, will recognize a very famous actor whose name is...
Sofia Janok.
Yeah. She performs the character. She's a Sami actor, and she performs the character of the scientist. And when I watched the film, I thought that she was performing actual scientific research. And I thought all those sounds were sounds that she was getting, and completely forgot about the prologue. So I wonder if you could talk a little bit about the choices of how you worked on the film, reveal some of the secrets that obviously we wouldn't be able to pick up unless we know everything that you know, like the archives, the particular instruments, and how this came together is this way to kind of show us things that we don't know, and particularly the scene where she looks straight at the camera and she kind of tells us what her grandmother told us, which is probably more of the, I don't know, I'm going to ask, is it really true or was it put together from other people's knowledge? And then the whales at the end, the songs of the whales. So anyway, reveal some of the secrets to that, which I think will make people have a much richer understanding of the film.
Yeah, well, this too was actually a commissioned piece, and it was to celebrate the 400 years of Mayflower. So it's really an Atlantic invitation to an Atlantic exhibition. And I immediately realized that I wanted to work really with, not with the surface, like the trading and the Black Atlantic and so on, but really about this three-dimensional living space that is underneath. And that's how I got the idea of starting to create acoustic interaction with the sonic dimension of the ocean. And I just did quite a bit of research actually in Exeter. There's a great institute at the university who researches fish language and fish dialogues and so on. And at that time, you know how it happens sometimes by chance, I was invited to the Lofoten Island to give a talk to the opening of a new building at the film art school there. And I said, oh my God, this landscape, I think I'm going to do everything here. And that's how I decided to do that, and then begin to research who could actually be acting as a marine biologist that I wanted to create. And it came a bit from the previous piece, Subatlantic, where I created a dialogue, but only not a dialogue, a narrative of a figure that lived several thousand years, actually marking the moment of the last ice melt, where the island suddenly kind of the water rose enormously in the Shetland Islands. It's almost disappeared. And so in that film, in that previous film, it was just a narrated figure. And in this one, I thought, I'm going to try a performance with a real person in it. And that was my first one. It was totally experimental for me. Everyone else does it already, I don't know for how long, but for me it was new. And so I wanted to also work with someone who knew a bit what she was doing, you know. And she is a musician, a music composer, and a performer occasionally, yeah. And since she was actress in one of these great Scandinavian series, she was very well known. Everyone knew her when we came to the hotel. They greeted her. So, yeah. So that was for the visuals, and I hired what you would call that, a theater designer, a scenic designer, to create all these props based on research we did on what hydrophones actually look like. And he then created these these pelican suitcases with all these instruments in it. Because I wanted to create almost like an animal radio where you could plug in all these different sound tracks coming from the sub-Atlantic. And so he did that. But the actual sounds were coming from an archive of scientists in various places. One particular one is I think it's called, I don't know, Woodhall or something in California, or on the Atlantic Ocean, actually. So there were hundreds of recordings that scientists did in the 70s, going out on little boats and creating all these wonderful sonic archives. And today you wouldn't be able to do that anymore. It would be the sonic pollution of the ocean is too big. You wouldn't get these noises, these voices in that same way anymore. But it's a combination of a lot of different materials. And then I worked also with someone who did these microscopic not animations. They're like usually microscopic film photographs, but he does microscopic films. He's based in Paris. So, yeah, a lot of research for short film.
But the thing that I particularly like is that all those recordings from the 70s can no longer be heard today if we use the same instruments, because it's the shipping traffic is one of the big noise polluters. And that is, I mean, it's extraordinary because it links in with particularly these two projects and other work, is how little we're aware of in our daily lives. So at least that's been my big takeaway, is like all these things I'm not hearing, all these things. I mean, I know that I can't hear whale sounds because our human ears aren't used for it, but just how little we access is extraordinary. And yet we as humans think that we know everything and move about the world doing what we want to do, at least a lot of us.
That's true, but artists also have the role of bringing it together somehow. I mean, Acoustic Ocean is a poem. It's a science-fictional poetry, right? So it's a very special language that I'm using in there. Whereas Forest Mind is more, I'm trying to convey a number of scientific facts. And the prologue about the hologram and its quantum entanglement also on the edge of the hologram. And I mean, this is Nobel Prize astrophysicists who speak like that. And I think it's just as crazy sounding as what this shaman tells us, which is something that he experiences in his vision, you know? And so I think it's interesting that we think of the indigenous way of thinking as indigenous cosmology, but science too has its own cosmology, and we should think about it in those terms as well. It's a culture. it's a culture that we have created. And
I think we will wrap up, and then we can actually ask other questions in private.
Yeah.
So once again, a huge round of applause for Ursula Biemann.
Thank you so much for coming.